Burgess here with Music Marketing TV. Today we are checking out Blue Cat's Late Replies. It is a monster of delay. Today we're going to be focusing in on the feedback loops. So down here at the bottom there are these two loops, and with them you can do all kinds of cool things. One of the things you can do with these is you can create some interesting chopping effects, or what appears to be chopping effects, which work really well as ways to generate fills for things like drum loops. So I have here, let me really quick bypass this up here. So I have here a setup with a drum loop. It's this up here. It's just on repeat. Sounds like this. And it would be cool if on the fourth one, there was a variation. Right now, it just repeats and, you know, it's a little less interesting. Generally, you want to do something 3 times and then something different the 4th time. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. And this is what I have just bringing in late replies. You know, it's just a bit of a different thing. You might not even know that that's a delay that's accomplishing that effect. And then over here, we have a bit wackier of a fill. So you can get a little crazier if you want to. The automation is a little more woo, but that's the idea, is you can take a loop and you can make it different. You can chop it up in interesting ways with using a delay. So let's go ahead and set this up. So I'm actually going to bypass this one. I'm going to close it. I'm going to bypass all the automation, and we're just going to ignore these. We're going to add a new Blue Cat's Late Reply. So we'll go ahead and grab that here, and we will go after this. So I'm deliberately sort of avoiding some of the plugin because there's just so much. It can be overwhelming pretty quickly. All you need to know is that down here are the feedback loops, and this little dial here determines if the feedback loops are being used. And so by default, it is on. So we are using the feedback loops. Each loop, we have loop 1, loop 2, has a region that it affects. We're going to leave these by default. But if the square is blue, that means it is being used in the mix. If it is not blue, it is not being used. So right now, loop 2 is inactive. We're actually going to leave loop 2 inactive for now. But if you wanted to turn it on, they have the loop 2 and the loop 1 settings. You turn it on, but it's now technically on, but it's not in the mix, which is what this really shows. So if we bring the in mix, you see it sort of turns from a transparent blue to a solid color. And so that means that this is now in the mix. It's going through the signal chain of Blue Cat's Late Replies. So we're going to go ahead and turn this off. We are not going to use loop 2 for the moment. You'll find that for this particular effect, you don't need it unless you really want to make some more complex sounding fills and sort of have just another option, in which case you may want to automate these on and off. So this effect that we're going to do, I call a spot effect. We only use it in certain spots. Maybe a fill effect would be a good option to call it too. We don't want it on all the time. It'll be overwhelming. The delay being on by itself already sounds like this. I mean, it's cool. Maybe you want that on, but obviously we don't. So we're going to go ahead and do a mix control for this. Now, there's a whole system in here, but I like to favor the DAWs mix control when I'm mixing effects on and off, because later on when I'm looking for it, I know that like 99.9% of the time, if the effect's being mixed on and off, it's the same control on every plugin everywhere. So it's just an easier way for me to think about it. So I'm going to right click and hit A. This will create an automation clip. I want to have it off at the beginning, and then we want it to turn on the 4th repetition, and we'll treat it like a gate. So it'll only be on for a second. And then for the last one, we also want this on. I like to clean up the ends of my automations. The reason being, if we have it ending like this and we go like this, this is a hanging automation, so it'll remember this value. So if we had more song later and we like played something, it's going to remember that this was on, and obviously we want this to be off at the end. So I like to have a little section here so that it doesn't, if we're out here, it'll be basically 0%. All right, with that, we now want to add in the pre-delay on the loops. So these loops, where they start is determined by an amount of pre-delay. So if you actually go down to the drop down and click browse parameters and then just move it, you can see, oops, didn't mean to do that. You can see what's being controlled. So in this case, it highlighted, I'll scroll up here. It highlighted pre-delay 1. If we actually move the second one, we see it shows us that this is what's being touched. So we're going to move it, and I'm going to right click on it and create automation clip. And right now we're just going to work with 1. Up here I use 2. 2 can be fun. You can do a lot more things. This effect can be stacked, and if you want to go that route, you can. But for the sake of tutorial, I'm just going to show you with 1. It's the same thing. You could add the other one. So now we're going to add in some points. Just as a reminder, since the mix is off here, it does not matter what we do over here because this section over here has, nothing going on in it. The mix is off. It only matters what we're doing in the window that it's on. And we want that because it's just overbearing to have it on all the time. So let's go ahead and create an effect. So we'll click down, and right now I have my automation on hold. So I get these stair step patterns. You might go for single curve just to increase flexibility. Hold can be nice because you just jump to specific points, which can be, kind of a cool thing. So let's just see what this sounds like here. So that's what it sounds like. If I choose to start from another spot in the measure, it can change. Completely different sounding. In fact, in that case, it didn't really sound like much. If we start over here, let's start like right here. Versus starting here. They sound different. And this is an important point I want to draw you to is you need to pick a spot that's going to sound similar to when you start from the beginning. So when you start from the beginning, what is this loop going to have in it so that when you make decisions here, it'll actually sound the same? Because if you make a bunch of decisions based on it starting like, I don't know, here, because you're sitting here auditioning it, it's going to sound different than if you start here. So in general, you can figure this out by just seeing how long the loop is and what's going to be in that loop. But in general, if you start on a measure mark, it'll usually work out. Unless you start doing like some more strange stuff, this will work out. So I'm going to go ahead and just start on the 4 so that it's consistent. And that's what we have here. So, and if we look at what's going on, loop 1's pre-delay is being shifted along, so it's grabbing another part of the loop, kind of is how you can think of it, and it's replaying that section there. So there we go. We like jump way over here. If we keep it like really low, maybe we make this bigger. Maybe we have 2 humps and one with a big swoop at the end. And that's what we get. Generally, the more steep, crazy curves you have, the more you're going to get these sort of pitch bend-like effects. So let's add another fill at the end. So it's literally that simple. You just go around, you find one, so you have one you like. I think that sounds pretty cool. So let's go over here to the end. Let's add another one. On this one, let's have, and it's always be careful when you add a point. Make sure there's a point at the end so that this shape doesn't change. So we're fine. It doesn't matter what happens here because, this is all blank. And we're going to add maybe a big swoop here, and then we'll chomp down something like that. I don't know. I'm literally just choosing a shape, and I'm picking to stabilize on the halfway point because I think, that might be a cool thing. It'll line up rhythmically with the drum beat. Kind of cool, but remember we need to preview our automation from a spot that'll be similar. So I'm going to choose to start on the measure mark. That's actually pretty cool. We could pick a different one. Say we want to try going up. Options. We could try something a little more flat. So maybe we have this. That actually, I think, is the best result. Sounds pretty natural. And, that's the process. You go through, you find something you like. Now we can jazz it up. We can spice it up quite a bit here. So our loop 1 is in the mix, and there are effects we can add on what is going on inside of this loop. So we could go to our effects. Now you can load VSTs and VST3s, but we're just going to go for some regular stuff. Let's add a verb. And this verb, though, you need to be aware, while the mix is off, it's still going to be processing. So if we have a long verb time, when we, like 19 seconds is enormous. When we hit this spot, there's already going to be verb going on, and this will cause it to sound like you've just come into the middle of a verb, and it will sound like this gated reverb, which isn't what I want here, but just to show you. Like that. It could be a cool effect. It could be interesting. I really want the verb to be local to the area. So to do that, I want to have a short verb, like 0.65, 0.55, something like that. So that way we get this sudden pronounced space, like and it sounds big all of a sudden, but then we just go right back. And it's not this like over the top effect. I actually had this on the first one and just didn't mention it. But this is an effect I like to do. I think it sounds cool. Super cool. We could be more aggressive. You could do stuff like grab a compressor and, I don't know, just compress the heck out of it, and we'll give it a pretty fast attack and then give it some gain. I mean, I'm just doing this blind. So we'll see how this goes. Let's give it a bunch of makeup gain. Yeah, so, and then if we wanted to take it sort of a step up, we could even do something like toss a wave shaper before that. Let's see what we got here in the effects. We've got a wave shaper right here. Clip, freak out. We'll go for saturate, softness at 100%. We'll bring the drive up. Let's see what that sounds like. And we got to be aware we're starting at a weird spot, right? We really want to start here if we want to hear what the rhythm is going to be like. You know, we could go for something like that. Maybe we mix it in part of the way. So this is technically now in parallel with this chain. And we could even automate this on and off. It could get really crazy really fast. So that is just the process, though, of options that we have as we go through. We could go ahead and make each one different, and you can again expand this to loop 2. You could add a second loop. You can control how they mix into each other. There's some interesting controls here for feeding one loop into another loop, but that's the general notion. So it can really go a lot of places from here. I encourage you to experiment and try it, but getting a handle just on the basic concept of this loop section and moving it around to create these interesting moments can really add a lot, especially if you have something that repeats a lot. This is a great way to add a little bit of variation. If you have any questions about this, feel free to let me know. Subscribe and hit that bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.